The casket was heavier than Douglas expected. His fingers gripped the brass handle until his knuckles went white, and he told himself it was the weight of oak and metal pressing into his palm. Not the weight of 20 years of silence. Not the weight of phone calls he never returned. Not the weight of a father he had stopped trying to understand. The minister's voice carried across the cemetery in fragments. Dust to dust. A life well lived. A craftsman. A father. A grandfather. Douglas almost stumbled. The word landed wrong, like a stone dropped into still water. Grandfather. His father had no grandchildren. Douglas was an only child, never married long enough to start a family, too busy building an empire to build anything that breathed. The man beside him, someone Douglas did not recognize but who had clearly known his father well, steadied the casket with practiced hands. They lowered it together, inch by inch, into the earth of Crescent Lake Cemetery. Douglas stepped back. The October wind cut across the water and through his coat, and he watched the mourners gather closer, their faces familiar and foreign at once. He had been gone too long. He had become a stranger in the town where he learned to walk. His stepmother Helen touched his arm. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the wind. "Douglas, are you all right?" He nodded once, not trusting his voice. She squeezed his elbow and moved toward the other mourners, leaving him alone at the edge of his father's grave. That was when he saw her. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you're watching from and what time it is where you're at. If you're new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. The woman stood apart from the main gathering, beneath the bare branches of an old maple tree. She wore a charcoal coat buttoned to her throat, her auburn hair shorter than he remembered but unmistakable even from 30 yards away. Vivian Holloway. His chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with grief. 11 years. 11 years since he had seen her, since he had left her standing on the boatworks dock, since he had driven away without looking back because looking back would have meant staying, and staying was never the plan. But it was not Vivian who stopped his breath. 2 girls flanked her, perhaps 10 years old, wearing matching navy coats with brass buttons. They stood close to her, one on each side, their small hands wrapped around hers. They had dark hair like hers, pulled back in simple braids. They had her posture, that quiet stillness she had always carried like a second skin. But their eyes. One of the girls turned slightly, perhaps sensing his gaze, and looked directly at him across the cemetery. Her eyes were grey-blue, pale and sharp, the color of lake ice in winter. The color that had skipped his father but marked every merit for 3 generations. The color that stared back at Douglas from every mirror he had ever faced. His heart stopped. Then it started again, too fast, too loud, drowning out the minister's final words. The girl whispered something to Vivian. Vivian's head turned. Their eyes met across the headstones and the fallen leaves, across the 11 years of silence, across everything he had chosen and everything he had lost. She did not wave. She did not nod. She simply looked at him with an expression he could not read, and then she turned away, guiding the twins toward the parking area. Douglas stood frozen. The mourners began to disperse around him, murmuring condolences, shaking hands, drifting toward their cars and the reception at Helen's house. Someone touched his shoulder. Someone said his name. He heard none of it. He watched Vivian open the door of a pickup truck, watched the girls climb inside, watched the vehicle pull away and disappear around the bend in the road. The grey-blue eyes of that child burned in his memory like an after-image. He had missed something. He had missed everything. Helen appeared beside him again, her expression gentle but watchful. "You saw them," she said. It was not a question. Douglas swallowed. His voice came out rough, scraped raw by something he could not name. "Who are they? Those girls?" Helen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her words were careful, measured. "Those are Vivian Holloway's daughters. She runs your father's boatworks now. Has for years." Douglas turned to face her. His stepmother's eyes held something complicated, something that looked almost like pity. "Daughters," he repeated. "How old are they?" Helen looked toward the empty road where the truck had vanished. "They turned 10 this spring," she said. "Twins. Your father adored them." The world tilted. Douglas felt the ground shift beneath his feet, felt the careful architecture of his life crack along fault lines he had spent a decade pretending did not exist. 10 years old. Twins. Grey-blue eyes. He did the math without wanting to, without being able to stop himself. 11 years since he left. 10 years since they were born. The numbers aligned with a precision that made his stomach turn. Helen watched him put it together. She did not confirm. She did not deny. She simply waited. "I need to speak with her," Douglas said. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Distant. Hollow. Helen nodded slowly. "Give her time. Today was hard for everyone. She loved your father, Douglas. He was more of a grandfather to those girls than most men are to their own flesh and blood." The word hit him again. Grandfather. His father had been a grandfather. His father had known. His father had held those children, taught them, loved them, and never said a word. Douglas looked back at the grave, at the fresh earth waiting to be covered, at the flowers already wilting in the cold. "Why did no one tell me?" he whispered. Helen's hand found his arm again. Her grip was firm but kind. "Some questions," she said quietly, "are easier to ask than to answer. Come to the house. We can talk after the reception." But Douglas was not listening. He was staring at the place where Vivian had stood, at the phantom shapes of two small girls with his eyes, at the 11 years of silence that had somehow produced two children he knew nothing about. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his office. A problem with the acquisition. Investors demanding his attention. The world he had built calling him back. He ignored it. For the first time in 20 years, he ignored it. The attorney's office occupied a small building on the main street of Crescent Lake, wedged between a hardware store and a cafe that Douglas remembered from his childhood. The sign above the door read Hawkins & Associates in faded gold lettering. Nothing about the town had changed. Everything about Douglas had. He sat across from Martin Hawkins, a man 15 years his senior who had handled his family's legal matters since before Douglas was born. The desk between them was cluttered with papers, but the document in front of Douglas was singular, final, impossible to misunderstand. "Your father made these arrangements 3 years ago," Hawkins said. "He was very clear about his wishes." Douglas stared at the words on the page. "The house passes to Helen for her lifetime, then reverts to you. The savings accounts and personal effects are yours outright. But the boat works." He could not finish the sentence. Hawkins finished it for him. "The boatworks was transferred to Vivian Holloway in a separate transaction. Your father sold it to her for $1. It is hers outright, free and clear. There is nothing to contest." Douglas felt his jaw tighten. "4 generations," he said. "That boatworks has been in my family for 4 generations. And now it is in hers," Hawkins replied. His tone was not unkind, but it was firm. "Your father believed she would honor what he built. He told me she already had." Douglas pushed back from the desk. He walked to the window and looked out at the main street, at the pickup trucks and the autumn leaves and the lake glinting silver in the distance. "He passed over his own son," Douglas said quietly. "He gave our legacy to a stranger." Hawkins was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "She is not a stranger, Douglas. She has been part of this town for 12 years. She learned the craft from your father. She built boats alongside him. She sat with him in the hospital during his final weeks. She was there. She stayed." The words landed like blows, each one precise and unavoidable. Douglas turned back to face the attorney. Did he leave anything else? Any message? Any explanation? Hawkins reached into a drawer and withdrew an envelope, thick and cream-colored, sealed with wax in the old style that Walter Merritt had always favored. "He asked me to give you this," Hawkins said. "He wrote it himself, a few weeks before he passed. He said you should read it when you were ready." Douglas took the envelope. His name was written across the front in his father's careful hand. The handwriting of a man who had spent his life building things that would last, who had believed that precision mattered, that patience was a virtue, that some things were worth doing slowly and well. Douglas had never believed those things. He had believed in speed, in scale, in the accumulation of success measured by numbers on a screen. He had believed his father's life was too small, too slow, too confined to a lake and a workshop and a dying craft. Now he stood in a small-town attorney's office, holding a letter from a dead man, and he wondered what else he had been wrong about. He did not open the envelope. Not yet. He slipped it into his coat pocket and thanked Hawkins for his time. He walked out onto the main street and stood on the sidewalk, uncertain for the first time in decades about where to go next. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his company. Another crisis demanding his attention. He silenced it without reading the notification. Across the street, a woman emerged from the hardware store carrying a bag of supplies. She was perhaps 65, her grey hair pulled back practically, her expression sharp as she noticed Douglas standing alone. She crossed toward him without hesitation. "You are Walter's son," she said. It was not a question. Douglas nodded. The woman studied him with eyes that missed nothing. "I am Ruth Holloway, Vivian's mother." Douglas felt something shift in his chest. He did not know what to say. He had not prepared for this encounter. He had not prepared for any of this. Ruth continued before he could find words. "My daughter has built a good life here. A hard life, but a good one. Those girls are everything to her. Whatever you think you know, whatever questions you have, you should understand that before you go looking for answers." Douglas met her gaze. "I do not know what I know," he said honestly. "I do not know anything anymore." Ruth's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Then maybe you should start by listening instead of asking. Your father was good at that. He listened more than he spoke. He learned more than he taught. He earned his place in my daughter's life and in those girls' lives by showing up every day for years." She paused, letting the words settle. "Can you say the same?" Douglas had no answer. Ruth did not seem to expect one. She nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than approval, and walked away down the main street. Douglas watched her go. Then he turned and walked toward the lake, toward the boatworks, toward the place where his father had spent his life building things that would outlast him. The Merritt Boatworks sat at the edge of the lake, a sprawling structure of weathered wood and wide windows, its dock extending into the grey water. Douglas stood at the end of the gravel drive, unable to move closer, unable to turn away. The last time he had been here, his father was teaching him to sand a hull. Douglas was 15, impatient, desperate to escape to somewhere bigger, somewhere that mattered. He had done the work badly on purpose, hoping his father would give up, would stop expecting him to care about something so small. His father had simply sighed and shown him again, his hands patient on the sandpaper, his voice steady as he explained why the grain mattered, why the pressure mattered, why everything mattered when you were building something meant to carry people safely across the water. Douglas had not listened. He had looked at the lake and imagined cities beyond it, fortunes waiting to be made, a life worthy of his ambition. Now he looked at the boatworks and saw what his father had actually built. Not just boats. A legacy. A community. A place where a young woman could learn a dying craft and master it. A place where two small girls could grow up knowing their grandfather's hands had shaped the world around them. He had rejected all of it. And all of it had survived without him. The door of the boatworks opened. A figure emerged and walked toward the dock without noticing him. It was Vivian, dressed in work clothes, her hair tied back, sawdust visible on her sleeves even from a distance. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. She checked the lines on a small sailboat moored at the dock, adjusted something on the rigging, then stood for a moment looking out at the water. Douglas did not announce himself. He simply watched, cataloguing the changes that 11 years had made. She was still slender, still graceful in the way of someone whose body was an instrument for work. But there were lines around her eyes now, the marks of laughter or worry or both. Her shoulders carried a different weight than they had when she was young. She had become someone without him. She had built a life in the space he left behind. He thought about the twins, about the grey-blue eyes that had met his across the cemetery. He thought about his father's journal, about the letter in his pocket that he still could not bring himself to open. A voice broke through his thoughts. "You can come closer. I do not bite." Vivian had turned. She was looking at him now, her expression unreadable, her arms folded across her chest. Douglas walked forward slowly, gravel crunching beneath his shoes. He stopped at the edge of the dock, leaving 10 feet of wooden planks between them. "I was not sure you would want to see me," he said. Vivian tilted her head slightly. I was not sure either, she replied. But here we are. A silence stretched between them, filled with everything that needed to be said, and neither knew how to begin. Douglas spoke first. My father left you the boatworks. Vivian nodded. He did. The attorney said you have been running it for years. That you learned the craft from him. I did. Douglas searched for the right words and found none. I did not know, he said. About the boatworks. About your daughters. About any of it. I was not told. Vivian's expression flickered, something crossing her face too quickly to identify. You were not told, she repeated. Is that what you think? I do not know what to think. I know what I saw yesterday. I know those girls have my eyes. The words hung in the air between them. Douglas felt his heart pounding against his ribs. He had not meant to say it so directly, so soon, but the question had been burning in him since the cemetery, and he could not hold it back any longer. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. She looked out at the lake, then back at him. Yes, she said simply. They do. Douglas felt the ground shift again. The confirmation, delivered without drama or accusation, was almost worse than the uncertainty. They are mine, he said. It was not a question. Yes. The word was a door closing and opening at the same time. Douglas pressed his palm against the dock railing to steady himself. Why? He managed. Why did you not tell me? Vivian's jaw tightened. When she spoke, her voice was steady but edged with something old and still sharp. I tried. I called you twice after you left. You did not answer. I wrote you a letter explaining everything. It came back marked address unknown. You had already moved on to your next apartment, your next opportunity, your next version of the life you wanted. Douglas closed his eyes. He remembered the chaos of those first months in San Francisco. The sleepless nights. The investor meetings. The apartment he had left after 2 weeks because the lease fell through. He had changed his phone number, too, after a flood of calls from people trying to ride his success. He had shed his old life like a snake shedding its skin. He had not considered what he might be shedding along with it. I did not know, he said again. The words sounded hollow even to him. Vivian nodded slowly. I believe you. But knowing and choosing to know are not the same thing. You could have called your father. You could have visited. You could have asked about me, about whether I was still here, about whether anything had come of what we had. You did not. You disappeared into your new life and you never looked back. Douglas opened his mouth to defend himself, then closed it. There was no defense. She was right. What did you do? He asked quietly. When you found out. Vivian turned to face him fully. The afternoon light caught her features, and he saw the strength in her that he had always admired, the steel beneath the softness. I cried, she said. For about 3 days. Then I called my mother. Then I decided what I was going to do. Which was raise them. Alone, if I had to. With help, when I could find it. Your father figured it out when I was about 6 months along. He did not ask who the father was. He just started teaching me more, trusting me with bigger projects, making sure I could support myself and them. Douglas felt something break inside him. He knew, he said. All those years. He knew and he never told me. Vivian's expression softened slightly. I asked him not to. I did not want my daughters to be a burden you resented or a duty you performed. I wanted them to be wanted. And you had made it very clear what you wanted, Douglas. It was not a family. It was not me. It was not this life. She gestured toward the boatworks, toward the lake, toward the small town and the quiet existence he had fled. I made peace with that a long time ago, she continued. I built a life. A good life. Those girls have everything they need. They have grandparents who love them. They have a community that watches out for them. They have a craft to learn and a legacy to carry forward. She met his eyes. They do not need you, Douglas. They never have. The words should have felt like rejection. Instead, they felt like a verdict, fair and final and impossible to appeal. Douglas stood on the dock, looking at the woman who had loved him once, who had carried his children alone, who had become everything he never gave her the chance to be. He thought about the letter in his pocket, about his father's handwriting on the envelope, about the years of silence that had calcified into something he did not know how to break. "I want to know them," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "I know I have no right to ask. I know I cannot undo what I did. But I want to know my daughters." Vivian studied him for a long moment. Her expression was impossible to read. "That is not my decision alone," she said finally. "They are 10 years old. They have their own minds and their own feelings. They know their grandfather loved them. They know the man who fathered them left before they were born. They have asked questions over the years. I have answered them as honestly as I could." She paused. "What I have never done is make them feel like they were missing something. Because they are not. They are whole. They are loved. They are exactly who they are supposed to be." Douglas nodded. He understood what she was saying and what she was not saying. She would not forbid him. But she would not welcome him either. He would have to earn whatever came next. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he asked. "Just to talk. To start somewhere." Vivian was quiet. Then she nodded once, a gesture so small he almost missed it. "Tomorrow afternoon. After I pick them up from school. Do not expect anything. Do not promise anything. Just show up and see what happens." She turned and walked back toward the boatworks. Douglas watched her go, watched the door close behind her, watched the last of the afternoon light fade from the windows. He stood on the dock until the cold drove him away, then walked back toward the town, toward his father's house, toward the letter he still could not bring himself to read. The house where Douglas grew up sat at the edge of the village, facing the lake. Its grey shingles had weathered into soft silver, and the garden his mother had planted before she died was dormant now, waiting for a spring she would never see. Douglas let himself in with the key Helen had given him. The house smelled of lavender, his father's scent, mixed with something older and deeper that he could not name. He walked through the room slowly, touching nothing, cataloguing everything. His father's reading glasses on the side table. His cardigan draped over the kitchen chair. His calendar on the wall, days crossed off through the week before his death. Douglas climbed the stairs to his childhood bedroom. The door swung open on hinges that still did not squeak. His father had oiled them every spring, one of 1,000 small maintenances that kept the house standing, kept everything running, kept the world in order. The room was unchanged. His old posters still hung crookedly on the walls. His textbooks still lined the shelves. The dent in the wooden desk, made when he dropped a trophy during a middle school meltdown, was still visible in the lamplight. He sat on the edge of his childhood bed and pulled the letter from his pocket. For a long time, he simply held it. The cream envelope. The wax seal. His name in his father's hand. The last words Walter Merritt would ever give him. Douglas broke the seal. The letter was written on the boatwork stationery, the same letterhead his father had used for decades. The handwriting was careful but slower than Douglas remembered, the strokes of a man whose hands had finally begun to fail him. "Douglas, if you are reading this, then I am gone and you have come home at last. I wish I could say I am surprised it took my death to bring you back. I am not. I have known you since you took your first breath, and I have watched you run from everything that mattered since you learned how to walk. I do not say this to wound you. I say it because you need to hear it from someone who loves you, and I am perhaps the only one left who does so without reservation. I have made mistakes as your father. Many of them. I was too stern when you needed gentleness. I pushed when I should have let you find your own way. I expected you to love what I loved, and when you did not, I let my disappointment show instead of my pride. You were always brilliant, Douglas. Brilliant and restless and hungry for something this small town could never give you. I understand that now. I understood it then, even if I did not say so. I was afraid that if I encouraged your leaving, I would lose you forever. I lost you anyway." Douglas stopped reading. His vision had blurred, and he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand before continuing. "There are things you will learn now that I am gone. Things I should have told you years ago. Things Vivian asked me to keep secret, and I honored her wishes because she had already lost so much and I could not bear to take anything else from her. You have daughters, Douglas. Twins. Their names are Iris and Violet, and they are the most remarkable children I have ever known. They have your eyes and your mother's smile and my hands. They build things. They take them apart. They ask questions I cannot answer and then figure out the answers themselves. I have been their grandfather in every way that matters. I have held them when they cried. I have taught them to tie knots and read the wind and respect the water. I have watched them grow into young women who carry themselves with a dignity that humbles me. I did not tell you about them because Vivian asked me not to. She was afraid you would see them as an obligation rather than a gift. She was afraid you would come back out of duty and leave again when duty lost its hold on you. She wanted to protect them from the kind of father you might have been. I confess I agreed with her. Not because I did not believe you could change, but because I did not see any evidence that you wanted to. Douglas set the letter down. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and took a long breath before picking it up again. I am not writing this to accuse you. I am writing it because you need to understand what you walked away from and what you might still walk toward. Vivian is a remarkable woman. She came to me as an apprentice and became my partner in everything that mattered. She learned the craft not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She stayed not because she was stuck, but because she loved this place and what it represented. She built something beautiful out of what you left behind. She raised those girls with more grace and strength than I could have imagined. She never spoke bitterly of you, even when she had every right to. She simply moved forward, one day at a time, building a life that did not need you in it. That is not a failure, Douglas. That is a triumph. She survived you. She surpassed you. She became the person she was always meant to be. The question now is whether you can do the same. Douglas turned the page. His father's handwriting grew more uneven, the strokes of a man running out of time. I left the boatworks to Vivian because she earned it. She stayed. She built. She honored what I tried to teach you and what you refused to learn. I could not give it to someone who did not want to stay, Douglas. I could not trust it to someone who saw it as a burden rather than a blessing. I do not regret this decision. I hope, in time, you will understand it. What I do regret is the distance between us. The phone calls that were too short. The visits that never happened. The grandchildren you never knew I had. I wanted more for you than success, Douglas. I wanted you to know what it feels like to be needed by people who love you, not just by people who profit from you. Find your way back. It is not too late. It is never too late until it is. I love you, son. I always have. Even when you made it difficult. Even when you disappeared. Even when I wondered if you would ever come home. I am sorry I will not be there to see what you become. But I believe you can become something good. Something whole. Something worthy of those girls and the woman who raised them. Be patient. Be present. Be the man I always knew you could be. Your father. Walter. Douglas set the letter down on the bed beside him. He sat in the darkness of his childhood room, the letter glowing faintly in the light from the hallway, and he let the tears come. He cried for his father. He cried for the years he had wasted. He cried for the daughters he had never held, the birthdays he had missed, the first steps and first words and first heartbreaks that had happened without him. He cried until there was nothing left, and then he sat in the empty silence and wondered what he was supposed to do now. His phone buzzed. Another message from his company. Another crisis demanding his attention. He picked up the phone and stared at the notification. $1 billion acquisition was stalling. His board wanted answers. His investors wanted reassurance. The world he had built was calling him back. Douglas turned the phone off and set it in the drawer of his childhood desk. Tomorrow he would return to the boatworks. Tomorrow he would face Vivian and the daughters he had never known. Tomorrow he would begin the slow, painful work of becoming someone worth knowing. Tonight, he would sit with his father's letter and let the weight of it break him open. The next morning came grey and cold, a thin rain falling from clouds that seemed to touch the surface of the lake. Douglas stood at the window of his childhood bedroom, watching the water gather in drops on the glass. He had not slept. He had read his father's letter 3 more times in the night, memorizing the words, the cadences, the places where the handwriting trembled. He had tried to find anger and found only grief. He had tried to find excuses and found only truth. Now he stood in the early light, knowing what he had to do and terrified of doing it. He dressed carefully, choosing clothes that seemed appropriate for a man with nothing to prove. A simple sweater. Dark trousers. Shoes that could handle the gravel and the dock and the boatworks floor. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a stranger, someone hollowed out and waiting to be filled. At 9 o'clock, he walked into town to buy coffee at the cafe he remembered from his childhood. The woman behind the counter recognized him. She had been a teenager when he left, working weekends for pocket money. Now she owned the place. "Walter's son," she said. Her voice was neither warm nor cold. "I was sorry to hear about your father." "Thank you." She poured his coffee without being asked, remembering how he took it after all these years. "He was a good man," she said. "He built a lot of boats for a lot of people around here. Taught a lot of kids to work with their hands. We will miss him." Douglas nodded. He did not know what to say. The woman slid the coffee across the counter. "Vivian will take good care of the boatworks," she said. "Your father made sure of that. He was proud of her." "I know," Douglas said quietly. "I am beginning to understand why." He took his coffee to a corner table and sat with his back to the wall, watching the town wake up through the rain-streaked windows. People passed on the sidewalk, some glancing in, some nodding at him through the glass. He did not know any of them. They all seemed to know him. At 2 o'clock, he drove to the boatworks. Vivian was waiting outside when he arrived. She stood under the overhang of the main building, arms folded, watching his car approach. She did not wave. She did not smile. She simply waited. Douglas parked and walked toward her. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture, the lake invisible behind a curtain of mist. "They are inside," Vivian said. "My mother picked them up from school. They know you are coming." Douglas felt his throat tighten. "What did you tell them?" Vivian's expression remained neutral. "I told them you are their grandfather's son. I told them you knew him a long time ago and you came back for his funeral. I told them you would like to meet them." She paused. "I did not tell them who you are to them. That is a conversation for later, if there is a later." Douglas nodded. He understood. She was giving him a chance, nothing more. He would have to prove he deserved more. She turned and opened the door, and he followed her into the boatworks. The smell hit him first. Sawdust and varnish and the deep, organic scent of wood. It was the smell of his childhood, the smell of his father's hands after a day of work, the smell of a world he had dismissed and forgotten. The main workshop stretched before him, high-ceilinged and wide, filled with boats in various stages of completion. Tools hung on pegboard walls. Workbenches lined the perimeter. In the center of the space, on sawhorses, sat a half-finished sailboat, its hull gleaming with fresh varnish. "That was your father's last commission," Vivian said. "He designed it himself. I am finishing it for him." Douglas stared at the boat. The lines were elegant, the proportions perfect, the craftsmanship evident even in its unfinished state. His father had always been an artist. Douglas had never let himself see it. A sound caught his attention. Footsteps on the wooden floor. He turned. Two girls stood in the doorway of a side room, watching him with identical expressions of cautious curiosity. One stood slightly in front, her posture bold, her chin lifted. The other hung back, her eyes moving over him with a quiet intensity that reminded him of someone he could not name. Iris. Violet. He did not know which was which, but he knew them. They were his. They were beautiful. Iris moved first. She walked toward him without hesitation, her grey-blue eyes never leaving his face. "You are the architect," she said. "Your picture is in the archive. You designed a building downtown a long time ago, before we were born." Douglas blinked. He had forgotten about that project, a small commission during his last summer here, a renovation of the old town hall that had been his first professional work. "That is right," he said. "I did. Mama showed us," Iris continued. "She said you were smart but you did not stay. She said some people have to go find out who they are before they can come back." Douglas looked at Vivian. Her expression gave nothing away. "Your mother is wise," he said carefully. Iris shrugged. "She is okay. She makes us eat vegetables." Despite everything, Douglas felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. Violet stepped forward then, moving to stand beside her sister. Her approach was slower, more deliberate, her eyes still studying him like a puzzle to be solved. "You have our eyes," Violet said quietly. Or we have yours. I'm not sure which. The observation landed like a stone in still water. Douglas felt his chest tighten. You do, he said. You have my eyes. Violet nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. Grandpa Walter had brown eyes, she said. Mama has brown eyes too. But we do not. I always wondered about that. Iris elbowed her sister. We are not supposed to ask about that. Violet ignored her. Why did you never come before? She asked Douglas directly. Grandpa Walter talked about you sometimes. He said you were very busy. He said you built important things far away. But you never visited. Not even once. Douglas did not look at Vivian. He did not look away from his daughter. I made bad choices, he said simply. I thought being busy was the same as being important. I thought building things far away was more valuable than being here with the people who mattered. Violet considered this. Were you wrong? Yes. I was very wrong. A long pause. Then Violet nodded slowly, as if accepting his answer for evaluation rather than belief. Grandpa Walter forgave people a lot, she said. He said holding on to anger was like carrying a heavy boat on your back. It only hurt you, not the boat. Douglas felt his eyes burn. Your grandfather was a good man. He was the best, Iris said firmly. And Mama is too. We are very lucky. Douglas looked at Vivian then. She stood near the unfinished sailboat, her hand resting on its hull, her expression still unreadable. But something in her posture had shifted slightly. She was watching him with her daughters, watching how he spoke to them, watching whether he would disappoint them the way he had disappointed everyone else. He would not. He could not. Whatever else happened, whatever this strange reunion became, he would not let these two girls down. I would like to come back, he said, addressing all three of them. If you will let me. I would like to learn about what you do here. I would like to hear about your grandfather. I would like to know you. Iris and Violet looked at each other, that silent twin communication passing between them. Then Iris turned back to Douglas. Can you build things? She asked. I used to. A long time ago. I have forgotten most of it. Violet stepped toward the sailboat. Mama is finishing Grandpa's last boat. Maybe you could help. She says boats take a long time because the important things cannot be rushed. Douglas looked at Vivian. She held his gaze for a long moment. Tomorrow, she said finally. Come at 10. Wear something you do not mind ruining. Douglas nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. He left the boatworks as the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the gravel drive. He walked to his car and stood beside it, looking back at the building where his father had spent his life, where his daughters were growing up, where the woman he had abandoned had built something beautiful from the wreckage he left behind. He had been given a chance. Nothing more than that. A chance to show up, to be present, to prove he could be something other than the man who ran away. He would not waste it. That night, Douglas sat in his father's study, surrounded by Walter Merritt's books and papers and the artifacts of a life lived with purpose. He found the journals on a shelf behind the desk, a row of leather-bound volumes spanning 30 years. He pulled down the most recent one and opened it to the first entry. The handwriting was his father's, steady and precise, the words measured and thoughtful. Walter had written almost daily, recording observations about the weather, the condition of the boats, the progress of various projects. But woven between the practical entries were other notes. Personal ones. Entries about Vivian and her growing skill. Entries about the twins and their first steps, their first words, their first time holding tools. Entries about Douglas himself, about the phone calls that came less frequently each year, about the hope that slowly curdled into resignation. Douglas read for hours, his father's voice speaking to him across the silence. An entry from 7 years ago. Iris took her first steps today. She walked from the workbench to the door without falling. Vivian cried. I pretended something was in my eye. That child has more determination than anyone I have ever known. She reminds me of Douglas at that age, before he learned to want things that were not in front of him. An entry from 5 years ago. Violet asked me today why she does not have a father like other children. I told her that some families look different from others, and that does not make them less whole. She considered this for a long time and then nodded. She has a philosopher's mind, that one. She will ask questions that have no answers and be satisfied with the asking. An entry from 2 years ago. Douglas called for Christmas. 5 minutes. He seemed distracted. I wanted to tell him about the girls, about how much they have grown, about the boat Vivian is designing for the Historical Society. But the words would not come. He has built a wall between us, and I no longer have the strength to climb it. An entry from 6 months ago. The doctors say it is my heart. Not unexpected at my age. I have written to the attorney about my wishes. The boatworks goes to Vivian. She has earned it. She has honored it. Douglas will not understand, but perhaps someday he will. Perhaps someday he will come home and see what I saw. Perhaps someday he will know his daughters. I pray that day comes while there is still time to matter. Douglas closed the journal. His face was wet with tears he did not remember shedding. His father had written about him with such love, such disappointment, such hope. He had watched Douglas from afar, cheering his successes and grieving his absences, waiting for a homecoming that never came. And now it was too late. Walter was gone. The conversations they might have had would never happen. The reconciliation Douglas had always assumed was waiting for him had slipped away while he was busy building things that did not matter. He opened the journal to the final entry, written just weeks before his father's death. The handwriting was shaky now, the letters uneven. Douglas will come for the funeral. I am certain of it. He will see Vivian and the girls. He will understand what he missed. Whether he does anything with that understanding is beyond my power to know. I have done what I can. I have left him the letter. I have left him the journals. I have left him the truth, wrapped in as much love as I could manage. The rest is up to him. I hope he chooses well. I hope he stays. I hope he becomes the man I always believed he could be. But if he does not, the girls will be fine. Vivian will be fine. The boatworks will be fine. They do not need him. They have never needed him. What I hope is that he realizes he needs them. Douglas sat with his father's final words until the clock struck midnight. Then he closed the journal carefully, returned it to the shelf, and climbed the stairs to his childhood bedroom. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the choices that had led him here. The ambition that had consumed him. The relationships he had sacrificed. The family he had never known he had. Tomorrow he would return to the boatworks. Tomorrow he would learn to sand a hull, to measure twice and cut once, to do the slow and patient work of building something that would last. Tomorrow he would begin the impossible task of earning his way into the lives he had abandoned. And he would not stop until they let him stay or sent him away for good. But as he lay there, a question formed in his mind that he could not answer. The question his father had asked in the journal. The question that would determine everything that came next. Did Douglas need them? Or did he just feel guilty about leaving them? Was he here because he wanted to be a father? Or because being a father seemed like something he should want? He did not know. And the not knowing terrified him more than anything else. The morning would bring clarity or confusion. Either way, he would face it. He had no other choice. The boatworks smelled different in the morning. Cleaner somehow, the sawdust not yet stirred by the day's labor. The varnish fumes settled overnight into something almost sweet. Douglas stood in the doorway at 10 o'clock exactly, wearing an old flannel shirt he had found in his father's closet and a pair of work boots that had seen better decades. Vivian was already at the half-finished sailboat, running her hand along the curve of the hull. She did not turn when he entered, but she spoke. "You came. I said I would." She glanced over her shoulder then, her expression neutral but watchful. Saying and doing are different things. I have learned to wait for the doing. Douglas walked toward her slowly, his footsteps loud on the wooden floor. "What would you like me to do?" Vivian picked up a piece of sandpaper from the workbench and held it out to him. "Start here. Long strokes, with the grain. Not against it. Your father used to say that fighting the wood only makes the wood fight back." Douglas took the sandpaper. His hands remembered the motion even if his mind had forgotten. He had done this as a boy, standing beside his father in this very building, learning the patience required to shape something beautiful from raw material. He had hated it then. He had wanted to be anywhere else, doing anything else, becoming someone his father could not understand. Now he pressed the sandpaper to the hull and drew it along the grain, feeling the wood smooth beneath his touch. Vivian watched him for a moment, then returned to her own work at the bow. They sanded in silence, the rhythm of their movements falling into an unconscious harmony. After an hour, Douglas's arms ached. After 2 hours, his shoulders burned. But he did not stop. He did not complain. He simply worked, letting the labor speak for him in ways his words could not. At noon, the door opened and the twins burst in, their backpacks bouncing, their voices overlapping as they recounted the injustices and triumphs of the school day. Iris saw Douglas first. She stopped mid-sentence and studied him with her head tilted. "You are still here." Douglas set down his sandpaper. "I said I would come back." Iris nodded slowly, as if filing this information away for future reference. Violet moved past her sister toward the sailboat. She ran her small hand along the section Douglas had been sanding. "This feels different," she said. "Smoother than yesterday." Vivian glanced at Douglas. "He has been working all morning. He remembered some of what your grandfather taught him." Violet looked at Douglas with those grey-blue eyes, so like his own, so full of questions she did not ask. "Grandpa Walter said you used to help him when you were young. He said you were impatient, but you learned fast." Douglas felt his throat tighten. "I was very impatient. I wanted everything to happen quickly. I did not understand that some things take time." Violet considered this. "Boats take time. Grandpa said you cannot rush a boat or it will leak." Douglas nodded. "Your grandfather was right about most things." Iris had wandered to the tool wall and was examining a collection of hand planes arranged by size. "Are you going to stay for lunch?" she asked without looking at him. "Mama makes good sandwiches. Violet likes turkey and I like ham and we always fight about who gets the pickle." Douglas looked at Vivian. Her expression gave nothing away. "If your mother says it is all right." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded once. "There is enough." They ate at a small table in the corner of the workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the half-finished boats that lined the walls. The sandwiches were simple but good. The conversation was dominated by the twins, who talked over each other constantly, finishing each other's sentences, arguing about trivial things with a passionate intensity only children could muster. Douglas listened more than he spoke. He watched the way Iris gestured wildly when making a point. He noticed how Violet observed everything with quiet attention before offering her own thoughts. He saw his father in both of them, in the way they held their sandwiches, in the way they laughed, in the way they moved through the world as if they belonged in it completely. He had missed 10 years of this. 10 years of lunches and arguments and ordinary moments that accumulated into a life. The weight of that loss settled on him like a physical thing. After lunch, Vivian sent the twins to do their homework in the small office at the back of the workshop. Douglas helped her clean up, carrying plates to the sink, wiping down the table, moving through the domestic choreography with an awkwardness that slowly eased. When they were alone again, Vivian spoke. "You did well today." Douglas shook his head. "I sanded a small section of one boat." "That is not well. That is barely beginning." Vivian turned to face him. "I meant with the girls. You listened. You did not try too hard. You let them come to you instead of pushing yourself on them." Douglas leaned against the workbench. "I do not know how to do this. I have never been a father. I do not know what they need or what I should say or how to make up for everything I missed." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. "You cannot make up for it. That is the first thing you need to understand. The years are gone. The moments are gone. You cannot buy them back or work hard enough to earn them. They are simply gone." The words landed hard, but Douglas did not flinch. "Then what can I do?" Vivian walked to the window and looked out at the lake. "You can be here now. You can show up tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. You can let them see who you are, not who you think you should be. You can make mistakes and apologize for them and try again." She turned back to him. "That is all any parent can do. The difference is that most parents start when their children are born. You are starting 10 years late. The gap is real. It will always be there. The question is whether you can live with it." Douglas met her eyes. "I can live with it. I have to. There is no other choice." Vivian studied him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Same time. Bring lunch if you want. The girls like variety." Douglas nodded. "I will be here." He left the boatworks as the afternoon light began to fade, walking to his car with sawdust on his clothes, an ache in his muscles, and something that felt almost like hope stirring in his chest. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Douglas arrived at the boatworks each morning, sanding and varnishing and slowly relearning the craft his father had tried to teach him decades ago. The twins came after school, their presence filling the workshop with noise and energy and questions that ranged from the profound to the absurd. Iris wanted to know why he lived so far away. Douglas told her he had thought the city was where he belonged, but he was not sure anymore. Violet wanted to know if he had ever built a boat by himself. Douglas told her no, he had never finished anything with his hands, and he was trying to learn how. Both girls wanted to know about their grandfather, about the man they had loved and lost. Douglas told them stories he had almost forgotten, memories of fishing trips and workshop lessons, and the quiet evenings when his father would read aloud from adventure novels while Douglas pretended not to listen. The twins absorbed these stories like sponges, adding them to their own collection of memories, weaving Douglas's past into their present. Vivian watched it all with careful attention. She did not interfere, but she did not encourage either. She simply observed, measuring Douglas against some internal standard he could not see. Ruth Holloway appeared on the 5th day. Douglas was alone in the workshop, sanding the same section of hull he had been working on for hours, when the door opened and Vivian's mother walked in. She wore a heavy coat against the November cold, her grey hair pulled back severely, her expression carved from stone. "We need to talk," she said. Douglas set down his sandpaper and straightened. "Of course." Ruth walked toward him slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "My daughter has been alone for 10 years. She has raised those girls without help from anyone except family. She has built this business from nothing, learned a craft that most men cannot master, earned the respect of everyone in this town." She stopped a few feet away. "And now you appear at a funeral and decide you want to be part of their lives. You sand some wood and eat some sandwiches and think that makes you a father." Douglas did not look away. "I do not think that." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Then what do you think?" Douglas took a long breath. "I think I abandoned them before they were born. I think I spent 10 years building things that do not matter while missing everything that does. I think I have no right to be here and no claim on their affection. I think the best I can hope for is that they let me stay long enough to prove I am worth knowing." He paused. "And I think you have every reason to distrust me. If I were you, I would not let me anywhere near those girls." Ruth was silent for a long moment. Her expression did not soften, but something in her posture shifted. "Vivian loved you once," she said quietly. "She never said so, but I knew. A mother knows. When you left, something in her closed up. She did not cry, did not rage, did not fall apart. She simply became someone who did not need anyone." Ruth stepped closer. "Those girls are everything to her. They are her reason for getting up in the morning. They are her joy and her purpose and her whole heart walking around in 2 small bodies." Her voice hardened. "If you hurt them, if you let them love you and then disappear, if you break their hearts the way you broke my daughter's heart, I will make sure you regret it. I do not care how rich you are or how powerful. I will make your life a misery." Douglas met her gaze steadily. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I have heard promises before. I have watched men make commitments they had no intention of keeping. I have seen families destroyed by people who could not stay." "I am not asking you to trust me," Douglas said. "I am asking you to watch me. Judge me by what I do, not what I say. Give me enough time to prove myself or fail. That is all I can ask." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, a gesture that conveyed neither acceptance nor rejection. "Your father was a good man," she said. "He loved those girls more than he loved anything else in the world. He would sit with them for hours, teaching them, listening to them, treating them like the treasures they are." She paused. "He talked about you sometimes. He said you were brilliant but lost. He said you were searching for something you would never find in a boardroom or a bank account. He said he hoped you would figure it out before it was too late." Douglas felt his eyes burn. "It is too late for him." Ruth shook her head slowly. "It is not too late for them. She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. "Prove me wrong," she said. "I would like nothing more than to be wrong about you." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her, leaving Douglas alone with a half-finished boat and the weight of everything he still had to prove. That night, Douglas's phone rang for the first time in days. He had been ignoring the messages, the emails, the increasingly frantic communications from his company. He had told himself he would deal with it eventually, when he understood what he wanted, when he knew whether he was staying or leaving. But the phone rang now, and the name on the screen was his chief operating officer, Marcus Webb, a man who never called unless something was genuinely urgent. Douglas answered. Marcus's voice was tight with barely contained frustration. "Douglas, thank God. I have been trying to reach you for a week. We have a situation." Douglas walked to the window of his father's study and looked out at the dark lake. "What kind of situation?" "The acquisition is falling apart. The board is meeting tomorrow. They are talking about removing you as CEO if you do not return immediately." Douglas was quiet for a moment. "Let them talk." There was a pause on the other end. "Let them talk. Douglas, this is a $3 billion deal. This is your legacy. This is everything you have built for 20 years. And you want me to let them talk?" Douglas thought about the sailboat in the workshop. The twins doing their homework in the back office. Vivian's hands on the hull, shaping something that would carry people safely across the water. "I am dealing with something here," he said. "Something more important. More important than your company. More important than your reputation. More important than the future of everyone who depends on you." Douglas turned away from the window. Yes. Another pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different. Confused. Concerned. "Douglas, are you all right? This is not like you. You have never walked away from anything in your life." "Maybe that was the problem," Douglas said quietly. "Maybe I should have walked away from some things and stayed for others." Marcus exhaled heavily. "I do not know what is happening with you. But I need a decision. The board meets at 9 tomorrow morning. Either you are on a plane tonight, or you are not the CEO anymore." Douglas looked around his father's study. The journals on the shelf. The photographs on the desk. The tools hanging on the wall that his father had used to build things that would outlast him. "Then I am not the CEO anymore." The words came out calm. Steady. True. Marcus was silent for a long moment. "You are serious." "I am serious." "Douglas, you will lose everything. The stock options, the board seats, the influence, the life you have built. It will all be gone by this time tomorrow." Douglas thought about what Ruth had said. About what his father had written in the journal. About the grey-blue eyes of two girls who did not need him but might, someday, want him. "I am not losing everything," he said. "I am finally finding it." He ended the call before Marcus could respond. Then he turned off his phone and set it in the desk drawer, next to his father's letter, and he did not take it out again. The next morning, Douglas arrived at the boatworks early. The sun was just rising over the lake, painting the water gold and pink, and he stood on the dock for a long time, watching the light change. Vivian found him there an hour later. She walked out onto the dock without speaking and stood beside him, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, her breath visible in the cold air. "You are here early," she said. "I could not sleep." She nodded, as if this explained everything. They stood in silence for a while, watching the lake wake up, listening to the birds begin their morning chorus. Then Vivian spoke again. "Ruth told me about your conversation." Douglas nodded. "I expected she would. She said you asked her to judge you by what you do, not what you say." "That is right." Vivian took a sip of her coffee. "That is a good answer. Better than I expected." Douglas turned to look at her. "I resigned from my company last night. Or they fired me. I am not sure which. Either way, I am not the CEO anymore." Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, the first genuine surprise he had seen on her face. "That is a significant decision." It did not feel significant. It felt necessary. "What will you do now?" Douglas looked back at the lake. "I do not know. I have some money saved. Enough to live on for a long time. But I do not know what I will do with my days. I have never not worked. I do not know how to be a person who is not building something. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then build something here. Douglas turned to her. What do you mean? The boatworks needs help. Your father and I managed it together, but now that he is gone, there is too much for one person. I have been thinking about hiring someone, but the right person has not appeared. She met his eyes. Maybe the right person has been here all along. He just needed to stop running long enough to see it. Douglas felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt like the beginning of hope. I do not know anything about running a boatworks. You know more than you think. You learned from your father, even if you have forgotten. And the rest you can learn. I can teach you, the way your father taught me. She paused. But I need to know you are serious. I need to know you are not going to wake up in 6 months and decide this life is too small for you. I need to know you are staying. Douglas held her gaze. I am staying. Words again. Then watch me. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, the same gesture Ruth had made, neither acceptance nor rejection. Come inside, she said. We have a boat to finish. They walked back toward the workshop together, their footsteps falling into rhythm, the morning light warming the dock behind them. Douglas did not know what the future held. He did not know if the twins would ever accept him. He did not know if Vivian would ever forgive him. He did not know if he could become the man his father had believed he could be. But he knew he was done running. He knew he was staying. He knew that whatever came next, he would face it here, in this place, with these people. That was enough for now. That was more than enough. The weeks passed. November turned to December, and the lake froze at the edges, and the boatworks filled with the quiet industry of winter work. Douglas learned. He learned to measure twice and cut once. He learned to read the grain of the wood and work with it instead of against it. He learned the names of tools he had forgotten and techniques he had never known. He learned the patience required to build something that would last. And slowly, carefully, he learned his daughters. Iris was fire. She burned with questions and opinions and fierce convictions about everything from the correct way to tie a knot to the injustice of bedtimes. She challenged Douglas constantly, testing his limits, pushing his buttons, watching to see if he would push back or retreat. Douglas did neither. He listened to her arguments with genuine attention. He admitted when she was right. He explained when she was wrong. He treated her like a person whose thoughts mattered, and slowly, grudgingly, she began to trust him. Violet was water. She flowed around obstacles instead of crashing into them. She observed more than she spoke, and when she did speak, her words carried weight. She asked questions that had no easy answers and accepted the uncertainty without complaint. She was harder to reach than her sister. She held back, watching Douglas from a distance, measuring him against standards he could not see. But gradually, imperceptibly, she moved closer. She started sitting beside him at lunch. She started showing him her drawings of boats and asking for his opinion. She started looking at him with something that was not quite trust but was no longer suspicion. The boat progressed. The hull was finished, sanded smooth and gleaming. The deck was laid, plank by careful plank. The mast was stepped, the rigging installed, the sails bent onto the boom. Douglas worked on it every day, his hands growing calloused, his shoulders growing strong, his mind growing quiet in a way it never had during his years in boardrooms and conference calls. He thought about his father constantly, about the lessons Walter had tried to teach him, about the patience and precision and care that went into building something meant to carry people safely across the water, about the legacy he had rejected and was now, finally, beginning to understand. One evening, after the twins had gone home with Vivian, Douglas stayed behind to finish a section of varnish work. He was alone in the workshop, surrounded by the smell of wood and the sound of wind on the lake, when he heard a car pull into the gravel drive. The door opened and Helen walked in. She looked older than she had at the funeral, the weeks of grief weighing on her. But her eyes were warm as she crossed the workshop toward him. "I wondered when you would come," she said. Douglas set down his brush. "I should have visited sooner. I am sorry." Helen shook her head. "You have been busy with more important things. I am just glad you are still here. I was not sure you would stay." "I was not sure either." Helen walked to the sailboat and ran her hand along the hull. "This was his last design," she said softly. He worked on it for months before he got too sick to continue. He said it was his masterpiece. The culmination of everything he had learned. Douglas watched her. Vivian is finishing it. I am helping. Helen nodded. He would have liked that. He always hoped you would come back to the craft. He never stopped believing you would. Douglas felt his throat tighten. I did not deserve his faith. Helen turned to face him. Faith is not about deserving. It is about believing in someone's potential, even when they cannot see it themselves. Your father saw who you could become. He never stopped hoping you would become that person. She paused. And now here you are. Building boats. Learning the craft. Getting to know your daughters. Douglas nodded slowly. I am trying. That is all any of us can do. Helen reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object. A brass compass, tarnished with age, its glass face slightly scratched. This was your father's, she said. He wanted you to have it. He said you would need it to find your way home. Douglas took the compass. It was heavier than he expected, worn smooth by decades of handling. He always had this in his pocket, Douglas said quietly. I remember playing with it as a boy. He would let me hold it and tell me how it worked. He said it was the most important tool a craftsman could have, Helen replied. Not because it pointed north, but because it reminded him that no matter how lost he felt, there was always a direction waiting to be found. Douglas closed his fingers around the compass. Thank you. Helen touched his arm gently. He was proud of you, Douglas. Even when you were far away, even when you did not call, even when he feared you would never come back. He was proud of the boy you had been and hopeful about the man you might become. She paused. I think he can see you now, wherever he is. I think he is smiling. Douglas could not speak. He simply nodded, holding the compass against his chest, feeling the weight of his father's faith pressing against his heart. Helen stayed for a while longer, sharing memories of Walter, filling in the years Douglas had missed. Then she hugged him and left, and Douglas was alone again with a half-finished boat and the compass and the slowly forming conviction that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Christmas came and went. The twins opened presents at Vivian's house, and Douglas was there, not quite family but no longer a stranger. He gave them handmade gifts, small wooden boxes he had crafted in the workshop, and their faces lit up in a way that made his chest ache with something that felt like belonging. January brought deep cold and long nights. The lake froze solid, and the twins went ice skating on weekends, their laughter echoing across the white expanse. Douglas watched from the shore, not yet invited onto the ice, content to be present without pushing for more. February arrived with a thaw, and the boat was nearly finished. The hull gleamed. The deck shone. The sails hung ready to catch the wind. All that remained was the final varnish and the naming. One afternoon, Vivian gathered the twins in the workshop and told them they could choose the name. Iris wanted to call it the Lightning. Violet wanted to call it the Dream. They argued for 20 minutes before reaching a compromise that satisfied neither and both. The boat would be called the Walter, after the man who had designed it, who had taught them to love the craft, who had been their grandfather in every way that mattered. Douglas felt tears prick his eyes when they announced their decision. He turned away so they would not see, but Vivian noticed. She touched his arm briefly, a gesture of understanding that said more than words could manage. That evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Douglas and Vivian sat on the dock, watching the moonlight play across the lake. The air was cold but not bitter, and the sky was clear enough to see the Milky Way stretching overhead. I need to tell them, Douglas said quietly. Vivian was silent for a moment. I know. They deserve to know who I am. They deserve to understand why I was not here for them. They deserve the truth. Vivian turned to look at him. And what will you tell them when they ask why you left? When they ask why you never came back? Douglas met her eyes. I will tell them the truth. That I was selfish. That I was scared. That I thought success was more important than love. That I was wrong about everything that mattered. He paused. And I will tell them I am sorry. That I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the years I missed. That I will never leave them again. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. They may not forgive you. They may not accept you. They may be angry or hurt or confused. I know. Are you prepared for that? Douglas looked out at the lake. I do not know. But I would rather they know the truth and be angry than live with a lie. They deserve to decide for themselves what I mean to them. Vivian nodded slowly. Then we will tell them. This weekend. Together. Douglas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This will be hard. For everyone. I know. But it is right. Vivian was silent for a while. Then she spoke again, her voice softer than before. You have changed, Douglas. I did not believe it at first. I thought you were playing a part, waiting for the right moment to leave. But you have stayed. You have worked. You have shown up every day without asking for anything in return. She turned to face him. I still do not trust you completely. Maybe I never will. But I'm starting to believe you might be someone worth trusting. Douglas held her gaze. I am trying to be. I know you are. And that matters. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the quiet sounds of the lake settling into night. Then Vivian stood and brushed off her coat. Come inside. I will make tea. We can talk about what we will say to them. Douglas stood and followed her toward the lights of the workshop, feeling something shift between them, something that was not quite forgiveness but was no longer distance. It was a beginning. Another beginning. And he would take it. The conversation happened on Saturday afternoon. The twins sat on the couch in Vivian's living room, their faces curious, sensing that something important was about to be said. Douglas sat in a chair across from them, his hands clasped between his knees. Vivian sat beside him, close enough to offer support, far enough to let him speak for himself. Douglas took a breath and began. There is something I need to tell you. Something your mother and I have decided you are old enough to understand. The twins watched him with identical expressions of patient attention. You know that I am your grandfather's son. You know that I grew up here, in this town, and that I left a long time ago. They nodded. What you do not know is why I left. Or what I left behind. Douglas paused, gathering his courage. 11 years ago, before you were born, your mother and I were together. We cared about each other very much. But I was young and foolish, and I thought my career was more important than anything else. I left to build a company in a city far away. I did not ask your mother to come with me. I did not think about what I was leaving behind. Violet's eyes narrowed slightly. And then, Douglas swallowed. And then I lost touch with her. I changed my phone number. I moved apartments. I was so focused on my new life that I forgot about my old one. He paused. Your mother tried to contact me. She called. She wrote. But I never received her messages. I did not know that she was pregnant. I did not know that she was going to have twins. I did not know about you. Iris leaned forward. You did not know we existed. No. I did not know. Not until your grandfather's funeral, when I saw you for the first time. The twins exchanged a glance, that silent communication passing between them. Douglas continued. What I am trying to tell you is that I am not just your grandfather's son. I am your father. I am the person who should have been here for you. I am the person who missed your first steps and your first words and your first everything. I am the person who left before you were born and did not come back until it was almost too late. Silence fell over the room. The twins stared at him, processing the information, their young minds working through the implications. Iris spoke first. You are our dad. Douglas nodded. Yes. But you were never here. You never called or visited or sent presents. Douglas felt his heart crack. No. I was not here. I did not know you existed, and even before that, I was not the kind of person who stayed. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Violet's voice was quieter, more measured. Grandpa Walter knew. Yes. He knew. He loved you very much. He watched over you because I was not there to do it myself. Why did he not tell you about us? Douglas glanced at Vivian. She nodded slightly. Because I asked him not to, Vivian said gently. I was afraid that if your father knew, he would come back out of duty instead of love. I wanted to protect you from being disappointed. The twins were silent for a long moment. Then Iris asked the question Douglas had been dreading. Are you going to leave again? Douglas leaned forward. No. I am not going to leave again. I am staying here, in this town, near you. I am going to help your mother with the boatworks. I am going to be here every day, for as long as you will let me. He paused. But I want you to understand something. You do not owe me anything. You do not have to call me Dad. You do not have to forgive me. You do not have to love me. I am the one who has to earn those things. All I am asking is that you give me a chance to try. The room fell silent again. The twins looked at each other, having one of their wordless conversations. Then Violet spoke. We need to think about this. Douglas nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. The girls stood and walked out of the room together, their footsteps quiet on the stairs as they climbed to their bedroom. Douglas sat in the sudden silence, his heart pounding, his hands shaking slightly. Vivian touched his arm. You did well. I do not know. They looked so confused. So hurt. They are processing. That is normal. Give them time. Douglas nodded, but he could not shake the fear that he had lost them before he ever truly had them. He stayed at Vivian's house that evening, not wanting to be far in case the girls needed him. He sat in the kitchen while Vivian cooked dinner, and they spoke in low voices about nothing important, filling the silence with small talk that felt like shelter. The twins came down for dinner. They were quiet but not hostile. They ate their food and answered questions about school and did not mention the conversation. After dinner, they retreated upstairs again. Douglas helped Vivian wash the dishes, and then he sat on the couch, staring at the fire, wondering what was happening in the room above. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock on the living room door. Douglas looked up. The twins stood in the doorway, side by side, their faces serious. We want to talk to you, Violet said. Douglas stood. Of course. They walked to him slowly, stopping a few feet away. Iris spoke first. We talked about it. For a long time. We have questions. Douglas nodded. Ask me anything. Why did you not try harder to find out about Mama? Why did you just forget? Douglas felt the question like a knife. Because I was a coward, he said honestly. Because I was so focused on what I wanted that I did not think about anyone else. Because I told myself there would always be time later, and I did not realize that later was already gone. Violet tilted her head. Do you regret it? Every day. Every single day for the rest of my life. The twins exchanged another glance. Then Iris asked the question that mattered most. Do you love us? Douglas felt his eyes fill with tears. Yes. I know I do not have the right to say that. I know I have not earned it. But from the moment I saw you at the cemetery, something in me recognized you. Something in me knew that you were mine. And every day since, that feeling has grown stronger. I love you. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life. The girls were silent. Then Violet stepped forward and took his hand. We talked about it, she said again. We decided that we are going to give you a chance. Douglas's breath caught. Iris stepped forward too, taking his other hand. But you have to promise, she said. You have to promise you will not leave. You have to promise you will be here for birthdays and school plays and all the boring stuff too. You have to promise you will stay. Douglas dropped to his knees so he could look them in the eyes. I promise, he said, his voice breaking. I promise I will stay. I promise I will be here. I promise I will never leave you again. The girls looked at each other one more time. Then they stepped forward and wrapped their arms around him, and Douglas held his daughters for the first time, feeling their small bodies against his chest, feeling the warmth of their acceptance, feeling the weight of everything he had missed and everything he still had the chance to become. He wept. He could not help it. The tears came and he did not try to stop them. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching, her own eyes glistening. The fire crackled softly. The winter wind whispered against the windows. And in the warm living room of a house beside a frozen lake, a family began to form from the pieces of everything that had been broken. Spring came slowly to Crescent Lake. The ice melted. The birds returned. The days grew longer and warmer, and the boatworks hummed with the activity of a new season. The Walter was finished. She sat in the water, gleaming and proud, her lines elegant, her sails ready to catch the wind. Douglas stood on the dock beside Vivian, watching the twins run their hands along the hull, marveling at the boat their grandfather had designed and they had all helped build. It was the day before the twins' 11th birthday. The boat was their present, a vessel that would carry them across the lake, a testament to everything their grandfather had taught them and everything their father was learning to become. The launching would happen tomorrow, at the birthday party. Family and friends would gather. The boat would touch the water for the first time. A new chapter would begin. But tonight, Douglas had something else planned. He asked Vivian to walk with him along the shore. The twins were at Ruth's house, helping their grandmother bake the birthday cake. The evening was warm, the sun setting gold across the water. They walked in silence for a while, comfortable now in each other's presence, no longer strangers, not yet something more. Douglas stopped at a point where the shore curved and the boatworks was visible across the cove, its lights just beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. He turned to face Vivian. "I have been thinking," he said. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." Douglas smiled slightly. "I have been thinking about everything that has happened. About my father. About the girls. About you." He took a breath. "I know I do not deserve anything. I know I left and I hurt you and I missed years that I can never get back. But I also know that something has changed in me. Something that happened when I started sanding that boat, when I started eating lunch with the twins, when I started understanding what my father tried to teach me." Vivian watched him quietly. Douglas continued. "I am not the man I was. I do not want to be that man anymore. I want to be someone who stays. Someone who builds things that matter. Someone who earns the love he is given instead of taking it for granted." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Vivian's breath caught. "I made this myself," Douglas said, opening the box to reveal a ring. Simple. Handmade. Crafted from wood and silver, the way his father had taught him to make jewelry as a boy. "I am not asking you to forget the past," he said. "I am not asking you to pretend I did not hurt you. I am asking if you will let me spend the rest of my life trying to become worthy of you." He looked into her eyes. "Vivian, will you marry me?" The silence stretched. The lake lapped gently against the shore. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Then Vivian spoke. "You left me once. You broke my heart. You missed the birth of our children and the first 10 years of their lives." Douglas nodded, accepting the truth. "I know." Vivian stepped closer. "And in the last 6 months, you have changed. You have shown up every day. You have learned the craft. You have earned the trust of our daughters. You have become someone I did not know you could be." She reached out and touched his face. "I am not the same person I was either," she said. "I am stronger. I know what I want. And what I want is a partner who will build something with me instead of running away." She took the ring from the box and looked at it. "Did you really make this yourself?" "Every piece. I wanted to prove I could create something beautiful with my own hands." Vivian smiled, a real smile, the first one he had seen from her in all these months. "Yes," she said. Douglas blinked. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "But we do it slowly. We do it right. We build this marriage the way we build boats. One piece at a time, with patience and care. No rushing. No shortcuts." Douglas pulled her into his arms. "I can do that. I know you can." They stood together on the shore, holding each other, watching the stars multiply overhead. And Douglas felt, for the first time in his life, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The birthday party was everything Douglas had imagined and more. The boatworks was decorated with streamers and balloons. Tables were set up on the dock, laden with food. Friends and neighbors gathered, people Douglas had come to know over the months, people who had watched him transform from a stranger to a member of the community. Ruth was there, her skepticism finally softened into something like acceptance. Helen was there, glowing with joy at seeing the family she had hoped Walter would live to see. The twins were radiant, dressed in their finest, ruling the party like the princesses they were. At noon, they gathered at the water's edge for the launching. Douglas and Vivian lifted the Walter from her cradle. The twins guided her toward the water, their small hands steady on the hull. The crowd watched in silence as the boat touched the lake for the first time. She floated perfectly, her lines true, her balance exact. The sails caught a breath of wind and fluttered eagerly. The twins climbed aboard, their grandfather's boat now theirs. Douglas and Vivian joined them, and together they pushed off from the dock, gliding out onto the water. The crowd cheered. The twins laughed. And Douglas sailed with his family for the first time, feeling the wind and the water and the weight of everything he had almost lost and finally found. Later, after the cake was cut and the presents were opened, after the guests had drifted away and the evening light had settled over the lake, Douglas and Vivian stood on the dock with their daughters. "Can I tell them?" Douglas asked Vivian quietly. She nodded. Douglas crouched down to the twins' level. "There is one more present," he said. The girls looked at each other, excited. "Your mother and I have something to tell you." Vivian took Douglas's hand. "We are getting married," she said. The twins' eyes went wide. "Really?" Iris gasped. "Really?" Violet breathed. "Really?" Douglas confirmed. "If that is all right with you." The girls looked at each other for a long moment, that silent twin communication passing between them. Then they erupted. They screamed. They jumped. They tackled Douglas and Vivian in a tangle of arms and joy, shouting questions and exclamations and pure, unfiltered happiness. Douglas held them close, his eyes meeting Vivian's over their heads. She was smiling. Really smiling. And he knew that everything he had lost had led him to this moment. Everything he had broken was being rebuilt. Everything he had run from was now the home he would never leave. The wedding was simple. They held it on the boatworks dock on a warm day in June, surrounded by the people who had watched their story unfold. Ruth stood beside Vivian, her eyes damp with tears she would later deny. Helen stood beside Douglas, Walter's compass in her pocket. The twins served as flower girls, scattering petals across the wooden planks. Douglas spoke his vows first. "I spent most of my life running toward things that did not matter and away from things that did. I thought success was measured in numbers and achievements and the size of the world I could claim." He looked at Vivian. "I was wrong. Success is this. It is standing beside someone who forgave you when you did not deserve it. It is watching your daughters laugh and knowing you had a part in their joy. It is building something with your hands that will outlast you." He squeezed her fingers. "I vow to stay. I vow to build. I vow to be the man you believed I could become before I believed it myself." Vivian spoke next. "I spent 10 years building a life without you. I learned to be strong alone. I learned that I did not need anyone to complete me." She smiled. "But then you came back. And you did not try to complete me. You tried to stand beside me. You learned what I had learned. You earned what you had lost." She squeezed his hands in return. "I vow to let you in. I vow to build beside you. I vow to trust the man you have become." They kissed. The crowd cheered. The twins ran circles around them, giddy with excitement. And Douglas felt, for the first time in his life, like he was exactly where he belonged. A year passed. Douglas worked at the boatworks every day, learning the craft, building vessels that would carry people safely across the water. He coached Iris's soccer team and attended Violet's art shows. He cooked dinner when Vivian worked late and read stories at bedtime when the twins could not sleep. He spoke to his father every Sunday. Not literally, of course. But he walked to the cemetery and stood beside Walter's grave and told him about the week that had passed. The boat they had finished. The joke Iris had told. The drawing Violet had made. The way Vivian smiled when she thought he was not looking. He carried the compass in his pocket every day. Not because he needed it to find north, but because it reminded him that he had finally found his way home. On the anniversary of Walter's death, the family gathered at the dock. The Walter bobbed gently in the water, her sails furled, her line secure. Douglas held his daughter's hands. Vivian stood beside him, solid and warm. He looked out at the lake, at the sky, at the world his father had loved. "I finally came home, Dad," he whispered. "I am sorry it took so long." The wind stirred the water. The boat rocked gently. And somewhere, Douglas believed, his father was listening. That evening, Douglas sat in his father's study, which had become his own. The journals lined the shelves. The tools hung on the walls. The compass sat on the desk beside a new photograph, one taken at the wedding, showing all 4 of them together, a family finally complete. Douglas opened a fresh journal and began to write. He wrote about the twins and their endless questions. He wrote about Vivian and her quiet strength. He wrote about the boats they built and the life they shared. And at the end, he wrote this. I spent most of my life searching for something I could not name. I thought it was success. I thought it was recognition. I thought it was proof that I mattered. I was wrong. What I was searching for was this. A home that smells like sawdust and dinner. Children who fight over pickles and make me laugh. A woman who forgave me when I did not deserve it. A craft that teaches me patience every day. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know how long I have or what challenges will come. But I know this, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I am exactly who I am supposed to be. And I will spend whatever time I have building something that will last. For my daughters. For my wife. For my father. For the family I almost lost and finally found. Douglas closed the journal and walked to the window. The lake stretched silver in the moonlight. The boatworks glowed softly in the distance. His daughters slept upstairs, dreaming whatever dreams 10-year-old girls dream. He thought about the man he had been. The ambition. The emptiness. The running. He thought about the man he had become. The patience. The presence. The staying. And he realized that the journey between those two men was the story his father had always hoped he would live. He had finally written it. Tomorrow he would wake up and do it all over again. Sand a hull. Eat lunch with his family. Build something beautiful with his own hands. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, for as long as he was given. He turned from the window and walked upstairs to the bedroom where Vivian slept. He lay down beside her and felt her warmth against him. I love you, he whispered. She stirred slightly but did not wake. Douglas closed his eyes and let sleep take him. And in his dreams, he was sailing across the lake with his father beside him, both of them building something that would last forever. The end.